What kind of things are you looking for when you decided this was a choice versus the other really good talks that are out there? Entertainment. Thank you. Yourself?
We're cultivators in Ohio.
Okay.
And so testing kits, at the point 3 total THC.
Right.
So testing anywhere 200, 500, and 700.
It never stops, so looking for lunch money? Yes. Someone's very tall in the genetic pool. Yes.
So we're growing cultivating in Ohio.
Yes.
And actually she's here with another group opening a retail store.
Oh, okay. So you're trying to figure out what to do as far as testing and
To do like preliminary tests.
yeah. Right. And you all?
We're farmers here in Fillmore, Indiana.
Okay.
And we're just looking for, of course, those are crop in the field, and then also we are making product, we like to test product.
Oh, okay. What kind of products you making?
Oil, salve, and we're looking at some other formulations for some cosmetics.
All right. So you had to have gotten into this for some reason. I mean, usually there's a motive for something that's happened, or it's usually not money.
Oh, we mean growing hemp?
Yeah.
Well,
The biggest bang for the buck for the property that we have.
So you got good land and now you're transferring it over to the,
We're both retired, we're retired within the last year and a half, 2 years, so there's something else to do. We can't just sit idle, so we decided to be hemp farmers.
yeah, so I retired 3 years ago. Yeah, so I decided this is the best way to go for my 401k as fast as possible. Someone said, someone once told me about 3 weeks ago, said they wanted to invest in my company, and he says, I have so much money that I can't spend it in this lifetime. And I said to him, I says, I had no idea you were terminal. You know, just, and so he had some invested and such. So, oh look, here's all the other fun stuff I do. So I worked for a company called Waters, and from that company I had developed a lot of extraction tools, and within that time frame there was also a company called Waters did chromatography. That was its sole purpose. Okay, so pharmaceutical, high-end, innovative, always, you know, one step ahead, and also we tried to keep 35%, you know, higher than anyone else. So that's how we did that, whether it's Agilent, Shimatsu, or some of the other testing. And then around 2012, late 2012, I had a new assignment to say, it's because I was the old guy. That's what they do with the old people. They say, we're going to make you a what do they call them, business something. So I decided I didn't want to be the business, you know, opportunity guy, you know, what do you do with the myself out in Denver, Colorado, on 16th Avenue. I'm looking for pharmaceutical and natural products because that's where they have all the teas, the Bigelow teas and the other teas that are out there. So okay, this is good, plus it's biopharma. And I knew that, and so I walked into a Starbucks and I saw everyone with tags, and because I was a sales and marketing guy, I saw pharmaceutical. and I saw, Drug Alliance, and I said, Drugs Alliance, okay, that's good. I asked them, what are you guys doing? They said, oh, we're at a Drug Alliance meeting. And I said, oh, where's that? And they said, it's across the street, the Sheraton. I said, oh, okay. So I went down the escalator, and I bought myself a ticket for $200, and I went to this Drug Alliance meeting. Do you know what Drug Alliance meeting was? So the Drug Alliance meeting was the early days of trying to have legalized marijuana. That's what they called it back then. And I had no idea, because I was actually pretty much wearing this. Blue sport coat, tan pants, blue shirt, cute, it's a little button, and a red tie. And it's terrible. We need to legalize marijuana. The room was, probably had 500 people. That was 400 people at the most, and that was as many people as there were. And then he just started railing, and I was in the front row because I wanted to figure out what was going on. And the TV cameras were going by, and I was doing one of these, because then I realized I was in a meeting that I'd never been in and had no idea. And then followed by a Black Baptist minister, and he started slow. Front row, and the movie cameras are on, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. And I didn't realize about the illegality. I didn't realize about the number of people of color that were in jail just for having an ounce of marijuana, and it was crazy. And so I thought, well, this is interesting. And I went outside, and there were little booths like a college, like a junior high science fair. And I'm just like, what? And then it was May 1st of 2013. I remember the day. It was a Friday, I believe. And the Boston Globe came out. We were from, here we go, Moreland 20. Gotta be like 6'1". 5'10". Oh my goodness, 5'10". She seems taller than me. How tall are you?
5'7".
Oh, you're 5'7", but you wear the heels. And so if I go back through, I realized that it had this thing saying Massachusetts now opening up medical marijuana licenses. And I remember thinking at the time, this is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Because I'm a PhD chemist, I've got 8 years of experience, I'm just like, this is so stupid. And then I looked into it more and more, and I looked into it and saw what was happening as far as the epilepsy, as far as seizures, as far as Charlotte's Web and everything else. And my sister died at a young age. She had epilepsy, died of a grand mal at like 54. It was terrible. It was a life interrupted. Terrible all the way through school. Everyone made fun of her. She was slow. Her eyes blinked. It was everything. And so I became more involved. So I became involved with the early days of Charlotte's Web. I remember when went out to Colorado. I was close on that trip, and he went to Charlotte's Web, and he went to some of the other accounts that I brought him to, and then he got on TV, and that's where everything started again. He says, I was wrong. This actually has medical capabilities. So I did 180, and then I just started exploring more and more with extraction. Fast forward to 2017, I had taken the company, so Waters is a large company, publicly traded, and so slowly but surely I brought extraction and supercritical fluid into Waters Corporation, and it went from $0 to 5 to 25 to $50 million, and at that point in time they were saying the last thing we wanted investors to be asking is, where's the 50 million coming from? Marijuana. Oh, aren't you a publicly traded company? So they cut the program, and I said, well, I'm time to retire. At which point in time, I started to go out and know all types of different extraction, and therefore, with my background in separation, that's where I became, more and more enamored with analytical tools. Fast forward to early in 2017, and with some of the things that were early on, this is a third generation box. It allows you to look at 11 different cannabinoids. It goes down to 0.02 of hemp, and on this one, from this one, and it's just a matter of all these tools being able to show. Though I am proud of what they're doing, and I know what it does and how it does it, so we can discuss it. So I brought this box out to an account out on the West Coast, and because Washington was able to do that extraction at the time, they were bringing in trim, and they were extracting by CO2. And they brought me in because they were having some issues about the formulation, so I said, okay, I can figure that out. I can try to figure that out. And so what I did was I would measure the trim before it went in, right? And then also measure the material that was extracted out the backside through 3 different collectors, and then measure that over time so I could do a rate. I knew what the rate of extraction was. And then afterwards, I would measure what was left over. Okay, so I could get a little PowerPoint presentation because I blew coat. I wasn't wearing blue jeans even then. I was still looking like well, like this. And so I go back to when I do this presentation. And there's the extractor and there's the investor. And so I said, I'm sorry, but you're only getting you're getting a lot of the material out of the bottom, but in the middle, there's a losing about 50%. You're not actually extracting it. And the other fellow says, no, John did it, and it looks yellow and it looks beautiful, and we got a whole lot. And so I'd done that because I could look at the numbers, and then I did that into milligrams per gram. So you had percentage. Percentage isn't a big thing. So you need to do the milligrams. You need to know how much is in milligrams, and then I changed it over into dollars. But before I changed it over to dollars, I got to that one, and the investor and the extractor's one, he doesn't. I'm getting it all. I don't know what he's saying. And so I said, okay, and the investor goes, John, and it got a lot of yellow, it looks good. I said, so I'll tell you what we'll do. Because I realized everything was going to go badly. I said, just take all the material that you've extracted out of the thing, put it in a big black bag, throw it in the back of the rental car, call it even. Don't pay me, just call it even. And the investor goes, well, wait a minute, why would you do that? And I showed him that he was losing, it was between $5,000 and $7,000 at the price point then, every time he was extracting. He was losing money because he didn't do that. And that's where I came up with one of my sayings, and that is, good is not a number. Good is not a number. You need to be able to know what those different components are. And so, even as I look at this and everything you guys are talking about, some of the technology has really moved forward a lot further. And I think that's some of the things that are also important. So all of these things are true. So over the next hour and a half or 2 hours, whatever it is, we'll walk through a little bit of the different ways of doing extraction. So number one is, I don't like science. There's no reason for me to believe it's going to change today. You didn't like science in the beginning. Nothing miraculous is going to happen in the next 30 minutes. That you're suddenly going to go, I can't believe it. And so the second one is people who really know that. They know everything about science, and they're just like bored to death that someone is asking them a question. Why is that person asking a question? I mean, they shouldn't be breathing the air I have. And the other one is because I have taught at the college level, where I teach up there. Good. Hello.
Hello.
You've only missed the rambling introduction, so you're good.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning. There was a guy that played the piano and then was a comedian. I'm looking at you only because you must be about my age, so can't remember, I've got to come up with as you get older. So you have there are no stupid questions. So we're going to walk through molecules, and we're going to walk through a lot of different things that you guys are actually interested in. So it's not a new concept. The new concept is hemp. So everyone mentions the fact that I'll ask you all what you want to do, but the other people was mostly wanting to stay out of federal prison or not have someone come in and cut down your crops. And the second part is to be able to make a nice formulated product so you know what's in it without having to go out to a research lab. Why are you all here? Is it the right room? That's this one.
It's the right room.
Okay, very
We're
good.
producing CBD products. Your job, okay, right?
Yes, I am.
All right, in the right room.
Uh-oh. Good. That works.
Reputation is,
Yeah, the reputation is out there. So, one of these is THCA and one of these is CBDA. And being an organic chemist, I make all my models. So, this one is THCA. This is the one that the government's not wanting you to have more than 0.3%. In some cases, will let you up to 0.5, I guess, or 1%, and not take you to jail right away. Gives you time to just say bye to the kids. They'll come visit you most of the time. They probably don't call any more than they call now, so what the hell? Oops, camera's on. So anyhow. And this is CBDA. So, as you all know, carbons are black, and that oxygens are red, and hydrogens are white. And the thing that makes this special between these two, and this is a side chain, the thing that makes this thing really special are these two blue carbons. So I made them blue. These are special carbons. And these special carbons are what allow this plant to really go into a CB1 and CB2 sites, most CB2 sites, and be able to, ouch. That's right up. And so, what happens is they're in a special configuration, and it's called a trans configuration. I also made these two hydrogens green. And as you can see, they're apart from each other. So there's different ways that these hydrogens can be for this chiral center. So they can be trans, that's apart from each other. But this is also trans. But these are two very different compounds to our body. It knows between this, and now we're going to do the YMCA. Or it can be cis, where they're on the same side. Or they can be cis, and they're on the same side. That's 4 compounds that it could. The major component to CBDA synthase. It goes through a biochemical plant transformation. It makes a specific isomer. That's what it does. And that's what this one is. So this is minus trans CBDA. Okay? That's important for what we're coming up with. This side chain over here has 5 carbons. Okay? If you were talking about CBDV, that has 3 carbons. Okay, so that's 3 carbons versus 5. Now, you don't get CBDV from CBD. There's no little man in there with a saw going, cutting off that carbon-carbon bond. It has to start off with CBGVA to go to CBDVA synthase to make that molecule. Okay? So, when you're looking at varieties, there are no strains. Okay? Strains are bacteria. There's no strains. Everyone likes to say strain. The only thing it does is just strain my patience. So when you go back through, it's a variety. Now you can't have a variety because this is illegal. This is an illegal plant. They're allowing us to do the hemp bill, and everyone goes, "Oh, it's legal." No, it's not. They just allow us to grow the hemp, and they're keeping their fingers off until someone does something stupid. And as you know, I'm going to take off this little chiral center here. Remember where I took it off of? So this is one part of the compound. So this has a nice ring, and it has all these double bonds and lots of little red things and stuff like that. And this is the other side. Okay, so that's got little things on it too. Okay, that's good. Makes me feel good. This over here, this nice little double bond over here, that's where we have, this is 9 and 10, so 8, 9, 10, so now you have these different carbons here, and that's where we have the 9. Let's go over here to THC. I once did a video that's up on YouTube. That hasn't gone viral because that was an interesting day. So, this is the same compound, but notice something different about this one. This oxygen is connected. This oxygen is not connected. So when this connects over to this other one over here, and we'll show that that does it, CBD turns into THC. So to make sure your life is even more complicated, if you make CBD and it's under the 0.3 and you leave it out there for 2 years and the heat, it's going to go to 0.6, 0.7, it's going to become hot because it's going to go to this one. Okay? So the plant can make this compound, but this one can degrade into Delta 9. You having fun yet? Tell me when you're just like, oh my God, please stop. Make the man stop. All right, so why do we have CBD? So CBDA, it actually has some therapeutic value. It's used as a prophylactic for migraines. The body does like CBDA. There's a lot of work out of Australia that's showing that CBDA is good. So when people say, oh no, you need to activate it. Well, first of all, you're not activating anything. This molecule is bioactive as much as anything. The other one I enjoy is that it's not psychoactive. Number, it is psychoactive because it's doing an action inside the molecule, right? This little molecule of mine is right here. So this is the carboxylic acid group. So what happens when you heat it is this goes away. Okay? I did it because it turns into a gas. That's CO2. So it doesn't go back on. So when you're heating it, it goes to that. And so now you go from CBDA to CBD. So where's the other problem? And why does it convert so quickly? It's pretty good chemistry. So what happens with, remember that this is sitting up over here, and you have these hey, how you doing?
Good. Hello.
I don't know. I think I know. I met you.
Yeah,
Right.
Ryan's work.
Yeah.
Andrew Holman.
Oh.
Here in Minneapolis.
Oh, okay.
Hey, hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well. I was just walking through the molecules. You've seen my molecule story before, so I've been walking through the molecules. So I will say, because these things come into my brain, so it's a side note. So the economy's been very bad, right? Everyone knows the economy is bad because of everything. But one of the occupations that have really been hit, and it hasn't increased in use, and that has been ventriloquism. It's gone downhill. They're not making a living at all. They're pretty much, it's been tough for them. I can do it now, but I can't drink the water yet. So now when I have the CBD, and I move this molecule, these oxygens over here, and this is the one that closes up, this one over here, what happens is this double bond has lots of oxygen. So when you have something like this, it means it has lots of oxygens. This one has lots of oxygen electrons. And what they do is they come over and they come next to each other and they close. And that's why it goes aqueous, a little bit of proton, and it closes right up. Very nicely. Every organic chemist that have ever looked at this thing, the minute I saw this back in 2012, I said, not a chance this thing is stable. And I'm going, no, it's stable. I'm going, no, I don't think so. And it's not. Now, there's a problem. There's only one problem with the CBD, and then we've also heard of Delta 8. Everyone heard of Delta 8? Now, there's some people that would say that I'm anti-Delta 8, and I'm not. Just because I write a lot of stuff on it saying, beware. And the only reason I'm saying beware is because if you don't have pure Delta 8, then things can go bad. And that's the only thing. You get degradation products. Things that can happen that you're not expecting. Okay? So what happens with this one is the Delta 8 over here, this nice little double bond over here, it moves over to the other side over here. And what happens with this double bond is this double bond for the chemistry side of this thing, and then I'll back up and make it easy. This nice little oxygen over here is sitting on top of that double bond. It sees it. It's like two teenagers in the mall. They can see that there's someone in the sports store and someone over in the other store, and they go, that's kind of nice. Thank you, I think I'd like to meet you. And so they do, and they do meet, and then this goes over here and it's more stable. This one, now that it's over here, is Delta 8 is far more stable as a molecule because now they're in different malls. Same people, but they're in different malls. They don't see each other, so those things, that's why Delta 8 is much more stable. That's why Delta 8 will move to Delta 9. But there's no Delta 8 synthase. The plant doesn't make Delta 8 as a biosynthesis. There's no CBGA Delta 8 synthase. So CBN, there's no CBN synthase. CBN is a degradation product where now all these over here are double bonds, very, very stable. Everyone is flat. It's a beautiful molecule, and it's not doing anything. It's like a saucer. This one's more like a chair. This has a little chair. That's how we chemists look at it. We look at it and we say, look, I can see from the side it apart for you. This is THCA. I'll take this off, make it just THC, because the A just keeps getting in my way of saying things. So now I have THC, okay? Remember we did the molecule on the other side? So it's an appetite stimulant, right? Because that's how we get cancer. Then you have THCV, you just lose 2 carbons, and now it's an appetite suppressant. A lot of evidence for appetite suppressant. So, when you look at that, and you say, how does the body know that it's lost 2 carbons? Because for us that, I'm not dating myself, that would be wrong. I'm showing my age. And those are 2 separate things. And so as you came down on the lunar lander, we were excited because it came down, and then and what they had to do is they had to dock. Well, that's what you're doing with a proton, on a protein in the CB1 site as an activity site. It comes down on that site, and when it does that, it makes different proteins, and then they go off into the body and do other stuff. Planet of trees or whatever it is, and it comes down and has a different stimulant. It goes off and stimulates things for appetite. I don't know what I'm doing that for, but if it stimulates things for appetite, with this one, it suppresses. It makes things that suppress the appetite. So when you're looking at that, and you say, well, I can't understand why a little bit of change would be difficult. That's why it is. What does that do for us for testing? I'll do one more part. It's a little more difficult. Everyone knows musical chairs, right? So remember we talked about the CB1 site and the CBD and how it can change and have 4 isomers. Well, it's kind of like having a single chair, and I just slammed this on my toe, but you didn't see that, so you don't really care. And so you have a chair and play musical chairs. And if I was to do this and it had enough people in the audience, I would have 4 people go around the musical chair, and when the music stops, that's one of the 4 isomers it's going to make. That doesn't mean it's the one that the molecule would make from a delta
from a THC where it's biosynthesized and goes to delta 8. It means it could be cis, trans, or trans. It could be one of those four. Now the cis are less possible, but the other ones can be very possible. And so if I was to do that, then I would say that I would have 6 people walking around a chair, and 4 of them are isomer A, okay? That delta 8, that delta 9 going to delta 8. And that's the confusion about the delta 8, because you have 4 different phases of what it could be from delta 8 when you bring it from CBD. So when people are going back to us and cautioning, as you know, due to the industry, as we say, there's some cautious because you have to have a purified molecule that has one stage. For us that grew up in the 50s, we had fluminamide. And that's why the US government goes through and makes every drug company do anti-American excess. They want to know every isomer that can be possibly made. Fluminamide was a major compound that allowed people to have sleep. Then they gave it to pregnant women. And with the pregnant women, there was something that was a very, very, very minor enantiomer. You know, a mirror image. It was a small amount. But in the woman's brain that was pregnant, it was accumulating poison slowly but surely, going through the umbilical cord, and we had, you know, there were flipper babies, there were no arms, you know, there were no legs, there was terrible deformity. And that's why when they go back through, the right people that are making the delta 8 correctly, that's a good thing. But if you're making it in the kitchen with hydrochloric acid and baking soda, good things aren't coming next. So, why is it important to be doing the testing so that you don't go to jail first on just the CBD? But when you're looking at the 0.3%, that's the part that you're trying to see. So let's think about 0.3%. If I have 454 grams and I have 0.1%, I still have THC, right? Take it from percentage to amount. You still have THC, but you just don't have as much as you have 0.3. So if you're looking at those numbers, you still have it. And there's some good articles out there that when people are taking you're still getting some THC. If you're taking that, 4 or 5 times a day at 0.3%, by the time you're done, you're about you're a good percentage up there. So something I should be,
No, I'm gonna video you for a minute on LinkedIn. Keep going. Just sound good.
Try this on.
No pressure there. I'll just watch my voice. Is it okay if I do the Martian?
No.
From Bugs Bunny? I'll tell you what. So now we go back through and we look at some of the tools that are available to us. And this is the part that we need to know, and that's the magic happens. So we can take any type of plant. Let's look at how to have something from a leaf. Typically what they're doing now is they'll take a bud, they'll snip it off, right? And then when you snip it off, just like any organic product that's been made in agriculture, it's 65 to 70% water, right? So now you got to dry it. If you really want to get away, or you have to have a technology that allows you to know that you're compensating for that moisture. When you're looking at spectroscopy, like the Chemicert here, or purple, and I'll show you how these work. These are both based on IR. When you're looking at that, you're having to take, it's not going to want to have water more than 15% because it's going to mess up the spectroscopy. So that's what it's doing. It's looking at spectroscopy. So when I'm taking that, I actually don't have a bud with me today, which is unfortunate. So when I'm going back through, even on the Chemicert, I can take and I can look at a bud, and I can use my spear here. I can spear it. I can put it inside the analyzer. I follow the instructions, and I can measure a bud without having to grind it. Now, how this one works, and I'll show it to you later, is it actually goes back through and it looks at that bud and it takes
readings all along the way to find out where the trichomes are within that bud. The other thing you do is on this one is that then you have other capabilities of grinding it. So the advantage of grinding is you get a little more statistical, take out the statistical, so you have more statistical validated sample. You grind it, you put it in here, has a different adapter, so rather than this adapter, I put in this adapter, and then I'm able to do a ground material. So I usually will mix things up. If you're actually running other types of plant, and you've done an ethanol extraction, now they have an oil adapter, so you put it in this one, and now you can do oil. And what it gives you is it gives you CBDA plus CBD, doing it as if everything from CBDA could be transformed to CBD, and it gives you that total potential CBD. It also gives you that total percentage of potential of THC. And this one goes down to 0.03, I think. So it can go down to 0.03, which is 10 times less than the 0.3, and those things give you more capability. And I'll show you how that works in a bit. This one is called, it's made by a spectroscopy. So these are all my toys. These are just toys, not selling toys. So, but this one's a toy. This one you take and you grind up, small package, take material, grind it up, put it into here, and on an iPad, an iPhone, it'll give you an answer of your total potential THC and total potential CBD, but not less than 2%. This is not going to keep you out of jail if you're trying to find out what you're looking for the amount of THC. It'll give you a very quick reading, about 3 or 4 seconds, of what your CBD potential is. So if you know that you're already not hot and you're just wanting to go around and do some of the sampling, then this will do that. I mean, just walking around and doing quick sample, you just a cube, which is kind of nice. You don't bounce that one unless you're wanting. If you're wanting another reason to buy another one, that's what you would do. So these are more in the 4,500. This is more in the maybe 2,000 or something like that. On this one, so on both of them they're pretty close. I don't know the actual spec, but I'd say easily within 1%. So plus or minus 0.5%. So if it's 13, it might be 12, or 12.5 to 13. And so it's going to be close. Then as I walk through from these, and that's all they give. Okay, that's all they give. They're not giving you any other data, but if that's all you're looking for, it's very quick, gives you the answer. This one's not running off to different computers and stuff. When this one actually does run off to Israel, and you have to be on the web to use this one. It has to go to Israel and come back and go into its database, and that's how they're able to work that process. My next toys, as I work through the process, is called thin layer chromatography. So thin layer chromatography is like paper chromatography, or it's like, tie-dye. So when you do tie-dye, it comes out the same way every single time. Or if you take a pen, I usually like to have a pen, and then I just take so I have some fetishes that I don't always share, but this is one of them, and it's a Muji fountain pen. So I write all my first drafts on paper, and I like this pen.
and just a little bit of toilet paper, or just a little bit of, you know, paper from the washroom, and you will see it spread out because it's black, but it's not really black, right? It's got some blue and some other colors in there. It's got different pigments. The other one that I like to do is I like to take dye that cakes, things like that. I'm trying to find it as I'm babbling. Anyone want to guess the size of my RV I bought this year? A PhD in organic chemistry.
You got one Breaking Bad, right? I'm sure you get that every time.
It really is, and so I bring all my toys in there and I have all my lab stuff. And that's because they don't usually let me on airplanes with all my toys. Or they're very bad to my toys. They took my orange box yesterday and watched them. I couldn't put it on the airplane, so I did the thing where I could put it on and then watch them. They just took it. I just like, really? You really throw it? It's just like, oh my God. You have no idea. And so, so I take food coloring. And if you take food coloring and you have, you know, the primary colors, like red, and there's always a little bit something, but then you take the green, and so every show I like to go to, I like to reinvent the wheel to show everyone that it turns out green is not a primary color. It's yellow and blue. And that's what thin layer chromatography will do, is you make a mark down here on the bottom, and I have some other pictures of that, and then from there it migrates up based on its chemical formula. So these two compounds, the THCA versus the THC, as I took it off, these will separate from each other because they're different based on a stationary phase. So it'll move from one to the other. So as they start off, I've never done this, so we'll start it off where they're on the bottom, except I feel more comfortable that way. So you got to be on the bottom of something, right? So I put a dot of material. So I take a leaf and I dissolve it in methanol and water. And so now I've taken off all the cannabinoids off of that leaf, shake it for a couple minutes. And what happens is you now have on this glass plate some silica, okay? And silica is a little more polar, so what's going to happen is one of these compounds is going to go through the solvent, so I'm going to have a solvent on the bottom that it moves up just like the tie-dye. And one of these is going to move faster than the other. I'm trying to figure out which one it was, because this is the CDA. So this is going to move one faster than the other. Because as it's going back through, this one will separate itself. What it's actually doing is it's actually spending a little bit of time on the stationary phase, the silica, and a little bit of time back in the solvent. So it actually does one of these. Just a million times a second, that's all. And so it does that, it's moving back through. So that's another test. And what that allows you to do, it allows you to make separations like this. I usually pass it around, but with everyone being COVID conscious, I'll do it this way. All right, a couple of experiments I've done. So when I've done this one, what I've done is I've done a separation, and then I placed it, I got to put on my mask in case I come near you. This is like all right, I don't think that's a keeper, by the way, just in case we're all right. So what happens is the dot goes down on the bottom, and then you can see something up here, okay? So I'm going to walk down the aisle like I'm doing collections, all right? So you can see there's a lot of compounds in here. This was actually a compound that was just taken off the leaf. There's tons of compounds. This one was taken off an oil, so there's less compounds because I've taken other stuff off. You know, so, and I sprayed it with a little dye. Okay, so I'm gonna come down the other aisle afterwards.
Do you see a lot of practical uses for using TLC plates instead of a laboratory device?
Yes. In fact, the one that they have out of Oregon is actually validated in the Canadian government as the real test.
Like why would you use a TLC plate or even FTIR if you have, like, say, an LC on site?
Ah, what if you don't have an LC on site? So, and that's the problem, is most people don't. And so this starts them off to understand it. So how many do you have, like, on site and such?
One HPLC.
So you have like a Shimatsu or
Agilent.
1200?
I'm not a chemist. It's got 4 numbers and it says Agilent on it.
Yeah.
They run it.
And
You still
that's,
can use like methanol and stuff with the
chloroform hexane mixture. But when you're going back through, the second part of this one is that when you see this one, you see that it doesn't have the entire, you can't really see much, so you're welcome to come up afterwards. But when you put on a UV light, now everything shines on there, so I don't have to look at a dye. But a lot of times I'll put a dye on it so I can do the circle. So it turns out, when you're looking at that, and the reason I like this one versus, as a starter, and I agree with you 100%. If I had an HPLC after working for Waters for 29 years, I might not choose Agilent first, but I would choose it second.
water doesn't like to support cannabis.
That's why I left. And so, when I go back through and I look at that, that's why you have all these different compounds. So you have these, and at the same time, you also have, find it? Another one that measures the size of the circle. So if you're only looking for CBD, but again, you're down to, if it's less than 1%, 1.5%, it's not going to show up on here. But if you're in the part of looking for all the other compounds, CBC, and the other ones, then you do have an opportunity to use that. Okay. Now, so loading volume is about 100 milligrams. So you typically do about 100 milligrams on that one. On a light lab, it's in between 50 and 70.
Wait, what you have to find out where you're at, when should I harvest and should I not, doesn't matter. I'd rather spend 15 grand in HPLC testing.
The other part that allows you to go back through is what is the best extraction and being able to work it through the process of formulation. So the first part is how are you able to be able to extract it, making sure that there's not pesticides, and that's the other part that you'd be looking at, because there's pesticide analyzers too. So this is like cannabis. Everyone knows this one. That's what this, now I'm going to be talking about a statistically valid sample. So, there's a story that goes with this one. Anyone are familiar with the Rotary Club? Rotary Club is usually made up of fairly conservative groupings of business people, and the average age is around 80. And then there's me coming out of the University of Vermont. I was a little hometown boy, and now I come up at 50, I was 62 at the time, 63. And so what I did is I went up there, and the first thing they do is they have bacon, scrambled eggs, coffee, and orange juice. And then what happened was I had this stare at me, because they know me, because I'm a hometown boy and I've gone back to do this thing at the Rotary Club based on an invitation. And so I go back through and when I stayed at the Marriott that night, because I don't live there anymore, I found one of these at the store.
You live at the Marriott?
What?
You lived at the Marriott?
Well, no, just for a day. They didn't know me, so that worked out well. And so I brought these, and the women were at one table,
and the men were at another. And I brought my light lab, and I did an analysis. I did an analysis of pesticide of a compound that I bought that time. And I opened this up, and I said, so I gave it to them. So when you're that old and you've been married that long, you don't screw around. And so all the bad boys are over there doing this. And so what I did is I gave and then put it on the table, and then another one, and put it on the table, and I asked them to describe them. And the thing is that they're always going to be different. And that's exactly what a bud is going to be like, no matter where you are in the crop. Whether it's the top of the plant, middle of the plant, bottom of the plant, outside of the plant, outside of the field, inside the field, where it's wet, where it's dry, those are all going to be different because they're under different circumstances. And so they ended up putting these all out, and that became part of the problem, because I said, if you were to analyze just this one, what would you expect the lab to give you? Is it going to be the same as this one? And they all said no, which was shocking. And I said, well, if we're just measuring the sugar, so let's assume that the sugar is like a trichome, I'm just measuring the sugar, okay? Because the other part is like a plant. It's not going to be, it's like the stock and everything. So they ended up taking them all out. I haven't eaten much, but won't eat these. So I got them. And that's why the lab wants a gram, or they want 2 grams. And of course, someone who's making THC, the first thing they're saying that the lab is doing is they're taking my shit and they're selling it. I know what they're doing. They're smoking my shit because they don't need that much stuff. They're taking all my stuff and they're smoking it. They're working through that process. So I had to bring them all out. And I said, that's a statistically valid sample. And then I asked them, what's on the bottom? All the sugar's on the bottom. I said, so if you have a sample and you've got a big thing and you've done that, you may not have a statistically valid sample, and your value may be higher than that. But that also means it could be higher on the THC, and you don't know it because the sugar's down here. What's the sugar? Sugar is the trichomes. Okay? Sugar is the trichomes. And that's the problem that you have. It says that last part of a mini wheats box. I mean, you're going to be buzzing for about 30 minutes. And they were very despairing. I says, now, the best thing to do with this stuff on the bottom is if you're having a barbecue tonight, okay, and you want to use this, then you smoke that, and you pass it around on a pipe, or you can roll it up into a resin and it'll be really sticky. You can roll it up and you can smoke it that way. I says, the problem is you better have more rooms because no one's going home. No one's driving anywhere. I says, the best thing to do for that is you mix it up with a little bit of tobacco, make it into a nice little snake like that, and then people are happy. Their eyes were like this big. Okay. Just like, oh my God. And I said it with a straight face because I'm me. And so once I knew I had them. Grow. And one of the things that they had on that side was the testing. How do they know that things are good? How do they know that a lab is giving? How do they know what products to buy? So I had one man come up to me, and he says, oh no, first thing he goes, my wife is using it for her hands for arthritis. He says, is she getting high? I'm just like, oh my God, it's just like, wow, I can't make this stuff up. I said, is she happy? Or smile? Hey, good. I was really worried that she was getting high. You know, the grandkids, and she watched the kids and stuff. I said, okay. And he was and then he came back around about a half hour later. He says, I got this problem with my arm. I'm golfing. And so this entire crowd went 180 degrees. But when you're doing that and you're having to do this, this is what's happening with the trouble with the government regulations. And this is what's happening with the trouble with trucking. This is what's happening with anything that's happening through the process. is because they don't have a quick test and it all smells the same now. So it's not different. It doesn't look broadleaf, thin leaf, and all the other stuff with all the varieties. It all looks pretty uniform and it smells unbelievable. The terpenes on these new varieties is incredible. Limonene, the myrcene, and the beta-caryophyllene. They're fabulous new varieties. But the trouble is now you have to have enough of sample in here and you have to be able to test. And that's why the testing is taking more and you have more companies out there coming out with things. This is just a few of them. But I also have other ones that are out there that are making small portable ones, like what you were saying, an HPLC that's about $14 or $15. One that's come out of Utah that uses NanoFlow, and it's about the same thing. It's about a small box that you can just pick up. Okay, those are the things that you have. The things that you talk about when you start to even start with HPL with thin layer, and the reason I like starting with thin layer is because you can see it. When you go through a column on an HPLC or something else, you can't see it. You know, so you're not sure what it's actually showing you. And so those are the things that are more difficult. Someone must have a question at this point in time.
What's your objection to Delta 8 you were mentioned before? That you're not a fan?
Only if it's impure.
By impurities, do you mean by just the fact of like the presence of Delta 9 or by just all the side chain reactions that are occurring to produce possible negative? I mean, all these stuff you're basically focusing on potencies of known matter, but then that's really the issue is not, I mean, we can all agree that Delta 9 is safe.
Yes. That's entirely hit on it. Entirely, that's my one sentence.
What do you recommend as a purification step once you've gone through distillation, like 90%? Is there any other kind of purification step aside from distillation you recommend?
The one that's the capital intensive, but at the same time is the inexpensive is supercritical fluid. I mean, I can separate Delta 8 from Delta 9 by over a minute. I mean, I can separate them because of the polarity, because supercritical fluid chromatography is a non-polar separation. HPLC is a polar separation. So what happens there is you're able to go back and get incredible resolution, and then it's a matter of scaling up so that you know how much you can load on each time. And then when you have supercritical fluid chromatography, it's got all the complexity once you set up the bucket over here of a crock pot. It just keeps going around and around. So you have maybe 98 to 97% CO2 and 3% ethanol. That's it. And then you just let it roll. Just let it roll. Just let it roll.
Can you get that scale though?
You can do scale. Yeah. But again, it's a CapEx. So you take that CapEx. I would do it. So if I was writing a business plan right now for Mazzucchelli or for ArcView or some other large investor, I would say this is what would be possible if I had the confidence that the U.S. government wasn't going to shut it down in another 3 months. That's the only problem. So you're right. If you're doing a synthesis of Delta 8 based on HCl or some other Lewis acid, and then you're quenching it at some point in time with carbon.
Sodium bicarbonate not good to quench it with? Is it possible to create more reactions because of that?
No, it actually just quenches.
It's fine.
Yes, the quenching's fine. It's not adding anything more. You've already done all the other one. You've blown up everything. And then the other part is once you move to that, because there's excellent studies, as I was saying earlier, there's excellent studies on Delta 8 way back in the 70s when they made a pure Delta 8. And the other part is that there's no way to make a pure Delta 8 starting off with CBD isolate, and it's really not going to be one if it's a crude, because of the 4 stereoisomers that it can make when that ring closes.
What do you recommend as your base product for synthesis?
On Delta 8,
Yeah.
I would do pure CBD.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Everything else. But if you have something that has a lot of compounds that are separated around it, then I wouldn't care. I mean, there are other stuff, but the trouble is they make friends. They do bad things together. said, way in the beginning, if you remember, we had the one chair. I've got four choices. I've got trans, cis, cis. I have 4 stereoisomers that are possible. And they're not equal in their being made that way. As an organic chemist, that's not going to be equal, but I don't know what that ratio is based on a certain temperature, pressure, and acid, and proton donator. I mean, remembering that Masula had he had a Lewis acid, he had boron trifluoride or something like that, didn't he? So, but he has a patent on it. He has a patent on that one process. I mean, for those, that's why the Delta 8 becomes really important, because, you know, people, if you have someone who's supplying it that's not taking those measures, and then you have someone who's supplying it that's taking those measures, but it's adding so much cost to their manufacturing that they're competing against people who aren't, you know, that's a tough model.
What's the solution?
The solution is the federal government has to come in and test some of these stuff. Because I know 2 labs that have tested over 4,000 samples, and they've only found 2 that are clean.
KCA? I think they just released today. I mean, really the most dangerous one people do the meat reaction, and I'm using a solvent like there's pulling over an SPD, like probably bringing over acid and other things possibly to their disorder.
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of different ways. So when you're looking at how do you make a living on the CBD, first of all, you have to stay underneath the 0.3%. So I'll go back to that and then come back around to the question. So from that, people, you're watching the price of the CBD go down based on the price of people making it into something else. And so now you're diluting what used to be the market for CBD, crude, and so I'll call them broad spectrum. So you have the other compounds. So I'll go back to that. I will come back to that one. So when we went back through and we're working early days with Charlotte's Web, in the early days of work that I did with them. So I helped them out, and I made beautiful with my CO2 at the time from Waters. There weren't that many choices. And so we go back through, it was beautiful. It was beautiful oil, it was nice, and they had a small purification system there also back then. And so that's 2013. And everyone started going back into seizures, which was not a good thing. And so what happened is, you made it too pure. So starting to add things back in. If you look at the research that Ethan Russo's done and some of the other work that's been done, John McFarland and UCLA, NYU, Maryland is doing a lot of work. You have to have a little bit of CBC and you have to have a little bit of THC to be able to stop the migraines. And so now I have a niece, I have my nephew's daughter went right into seizures, you know, just 10, 15 a day. It was horrific. And then with a combination down at Boston Children's, getting her onto traditional medicine plus a formulation, she's down to 1 or 2 a month. I mean, that's the miracle of what can happen. And then when you have people taking that and just, you know, funneling over, so now you have a price crunch on the people trying to make the CBD broad spectrum based on the things that they're trying to make with Delta 8. That's a tough go. But it's the pure one I would start with first. But even there, you're able to isolate it. I'm doing a lot more chemistry with CO2 and nothing else. I can change it over. I can change it over to CO2. I don't need any chemicals. Well, I'm using chemicals. So CO2 plus water gives you carbonic acid. One of the experiments that's always fun to do in the kitchen is if you have a soda stream and a pH meter, which everyone has a pH meter at home, I'm sure. And so you have a soda stream and a pH meter, and you do the soda stream and you do the water, and it starts off at neutral, you do the first thing, it goes down to about 5.5, go. You do the second one, you measure that pH, it goes down to 4, it goes down to 3, it goes down to 2 point. You actually don't have to make that sound. The soda stream makes that sound. And when it comes to the end, that's when the soda stream goes and it stops because it has that thing in there. And then it will go down, and it's around 2. So it's about the same pH as orange juice, and that's just the water with a soda stream. And if you take that and you measure it over time, it will go back up. And so what happens with CO2 under pressure when you're doing an extraction like that, you're down to a pH of 1 in that reactor. I mean, it's not neutral in that reactor. It's got a lot of acid in there. So you can do a lot of clever chemistry. No, it's clever. You can do chemistry. That was my own, just because I did it, made it clever. You can do chemistry on that side and be able to have other things. So, the other things that we're looking at are from our hotel room. How do you know if somewhere along the way that someone comes into your facility because you're wanting to sell the material for someone else to extract, or you've given it to someone to extract, and now you want to make sure that they've extracted your stuff? Not that anyone would ever do anything devious or illegal in this industry, but it is possible. And not everyone can do this. So these are two coffees, and they're the same, right? There's a little bit different between these two. One of these is caffeinated, one of them is decaffeinated. Okay? So even when you're looking at that, you can tell very quickly that you've got your own compound, because your hemp is going to have a fingerprint. It's going to have a fingerprint, just like oil from wherever it is in the world has its fingerprint. You will have a fingerprint. And that's the part that you're making sure that you're getting your oil back, and so it's just another safeguard. Or if you're doing toll processing, make sure you take a fingerprint in case someone comes back and says, well, I don't know that was the same one. The other one now is when you have this, you have organic, right? You can grow everything organic for 3 years and then come back and someone extracts it with something that's not organic. You want to make sure that if you're doing an extraction, they have a process that's organic all the way through. This is organic chamomile. So and it says it's caffeine free. I'm hoping it's caffeine free. I don't want to be buzzed on that one. And then you have different ways of doing extraction, but each one of these is going to bring you to this component. So on this, I will, just because it's too small, I don't have any, I should have some. So what happens with, I'll go back for a second. This one, you're having it use a foam, okay? So you have to use an Android foam with this one. With this one, I can do a bud if anyone's got a bud on. No one's got any bud on them, I forgot to get any. So you can do this one on your iPhone, it saves all your results. This one here, you can either go to the web, it goes to my phone, and it will send me a message no matter if you're out in the field or wherever you are in the laboratory. It will give you a call and say, I finished this result, which is nice for a lot of the farmers. And on this one, I'll just pick some sample here. No idea what this one is, but dangers of doing things. Not the prettiest chronogram I've ever seen out there. But that allows you to look at each separation within that. So you can go back through and not only make sure that you have a time, so remembering that this was like a TLC plate, so let's say that it looks like this one. So on this one, I have a a chromatographic peak. This one, so this is the amount that's in there based on the, remember in the UV, I put the UV light on the TLC plate. This is the liftoff and touchdown of this compound, and so you're seeing that it came out really quickly. So it didn't spend as much time in there. You see this one here. This one came out later, but also notice these small ones here. So based on what I know about this chromatogram, I know that this is a high CBD product because it would tell me the numbers on the main screen. It's got some CBC in there because I know excuse me, this is THC, THCA. And so you can still see that there's amount in there. And what happens is it gives you a reading up on top on what those different compounds could be. Let's see if I can find one that's a little more fun. Blank is not fun. Waste on second run. Right? This. I think we're going to look at this. Here we go. This is what you would see on the screen. Okay? You see THCA 6, total potential 5.3. So this is obviously not a hemp product. Okay? It's a trim from a THC plant. Now, when you look at the total potential, this is THCA, but you notice that this is less. This is 5.3. So this is the amount here times 0.87. When you look at what the chromatogram looks like, you can see where the THCA comes out way back here. There's some other stuff up on the front side, but not as much that this is looking at. So when you're looking at testing, how much are you just looking for just for THCA, then I would go with something like this. Okay, it's going to measure one thing, it's going to measure plant, it's going to measure 2 or 3 different ways, it's going to have information about its cost, about the amount, and the cost per sample is a $35 subscription per month or something like that, so it doesn't cost you any more than the electricity. You're just buying that first shot, and then you're just looking at one thing. You're just measuring one thing. That's all you care about. If you're wanting to move towards something that gives you more information, then something like thin the distance it travels, and that's like $600, and it's probably $20 a sample or something like that. But it gets you to know that there's other stuff in there without having to spend a lot of money on that side. And it's, again, easy to do. The other one is now you move towards something like this. So if you're moving into a model where you're doing a separation, those are all in between, I'm going to say about $14,000 and $17,000. It's in that price range. And that's going to give you a lot more information, but it depends on how much information you're actually really needing. I don't know what time it is. Really? Oh, so we have another, no, because I have to be in the other places, right? Yeah. So, questions. Got to be lots of questions.
This is a kind of towards this, but as far as we're testing for THC THC 9 for out on the street for law enforcement, are they coming up with an easy like snap test to tell between the stuff I have has too much THC and 9 in it, or is it CBD, or, because, you know, that's, a lot of people stress about carrying kind of bud that they know that's not illegal, but yet you get pulled over and there's some THC and all, maybe that snap test is going to show, but it won't show if it's legal or not.
So right now they're, so on the, what I know from public knowledge is they're buying that one. And they're buying that one with a module that's called, what's it called, like enforcement or something like that, or law and order, I can't remember the actual thing. And it will measure just, it will go after just the THC. They don't care how much CBD you have, they're looking to see that someone's not doing something illegal. Like you can have a COA and everything, but they know that in 15 minutes they're gonna have a yay nay on whether to hold the truck, to look at another sample, or just let the truck go. And that's because of the varieties now. I mean, you look at the cherry wine or some of those, if you go by a cherry wine field, I mean, it's amazing. The smell and the terpenes and it looks the same, and now law enforcement has no idea. And so, actually I think it's called law enforcement. And so they have a measurement tool like that they just go up and they're buying these all over the place. I mean, I know California, Fish and Wildlife has them, they have 2 or 3 in each facility, so they can go out, because the reason Fish and Wildlife is because people are ruining the water supply by taking them, California's California, who would have thought? And so they're taking the water supply, but they're also using pesticides and they're using other things in them. So that's what they're doing for that one. If they don't have this one as much because it's a spectrometer, it really needs to be in a stable place. And the police are rarely, I almost said the police are rarely stable. The police are rarely in a stable place to be able to do that test. This one is a quick shake up. You do one, this is too bad I don't have a sample, because then it just goes back to it and just gives you an answer in 8.5 minutes, and then you have all the other material. But police are they have a modified one that's just looking at just THC.
I got to have a cookie with that one.
Oh, I don't think I can do a cookie.
Or a brownie.
I can't do a brownie. Well, I can't do a brownie. I don't have my other chemicals and grinding.
I got that, take it out of it.
I could take a little bit of that one.
I just wanted to
So when I'm going back through, it's so this one will do. Why I like some of the HPLC is I can do a 3-week-old plant. So I can do a plant from the time that leaf comes out, 3 weeks after it comes out, I know it's in that plant, because the trichomes underneath the plant, even though they're very small, and I can still get a reading out of that one, all the way up to something that goes up into a final product. So that's the beauty of something like that. But it's sitting up there at 14,000. The other way I've seen it is people getting a group of farms together and then putting them all together and just saying, of course, almost every farmer's neat. I'm a 5th generation dairy farmer, and I ran away from home at 28 from Vermont, left everybody, and got into the joint business. So as I'm not sure I made it or not. So that's what you have to monitor. You can monitor your crop all the way through. And you can monitor your same thing. The other one I saw, a woman out of Boston. Has anyone seen this one? It's called a Lift from Arden. She did a nice job. She started off just by helping people decarboxylate at home, because they were making their own medicine at home. And so what happens is all you have to do is you put the product in the tube here, and then you can do some small product formulation, and then it just decarboxylates. And then she started, which is kind of cool, she started to make these oil infusion kits. Like this is an olive oil one, then there's a coconut one. It's a nice little, so you can start to make your own formulations, but then at home, you can do this by looking at what you should put in for oil, and then making sure that it's not doing something to your product. And so those are the things that are coming out now. There are a lot of home-based things that not sticking it. You don't need to stick it. You don't need to stick it in your oven, because someone's going to come over at some time and just ask what you're cooking.
just showed us, is it decarboxylator or?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's called LIP. So it decarboxylates, and then it also, she has parts where she has total recipes. So it's ardent. You look at that up on the web and all the different things that she has. She's a lawyer out of Boston, and started off with a little small company, and now it's big and starting other oils to help people make medicines at home. So not having to go out and always buy something. That's kind of cool. That's what I got.
How big of a sample to extract?
Okay, so with Light Lab, I'm 100 milligrams. So if I'm doing an oil, or if I'm doing something like a pen, I'll use only 40 milligrams. So if you take 40 milligrams, that's just a dot of stuff. That's all you need, and 100 milligrams. So the biggest amount of sample I need is my hemp one. If I'm really looking at a small sample, I'll need 500 milligrams, which is
Without
is
food.
so food on that side. What I do is I take and I get myself about 1 milligram per mil concentration, and as long as I'm in that area of UV, then I'm going to get a really good answer. So if I have 15 milligrams, I go back through. If I have a tincture and I know that it's supposed to have 1,000 milligrams, I'll back it off and put that much into it so that I know I'm in that area. It was not loose.
When you mentioned the organic tea,
Yes.
and making sure that it goes through the process and was processed organically, what does that, what would be the difference? I hear a lot about CO2 and ethanol.
Okay.
What would
So when you have a lot of material and you're going through ethanol, sometimes you have to make sure that what they have is they have a GMP facility and one that allows you to have organic ethanol. Because you can get ethanol that has other material in it, so it's cheaper. And then based on that, typically a factory will say that they are organic. And so that's the other part too. They have to have the right,
you use ethanol? It just has to be-
you have to be organic.
Some people will make their ethanol themselves through cellulose degradation, and that cellulose is organic.
Is that the only option for organic?
Yeah. I mean, CO2 is obviously organic, because you're not using solvent, but you have to, again, when you're moving towards that line, you're moving towards an organic solution for CO2, and then making sure that someone doesn't add something along the process. To my amusement, a little bit during the early days, is I had CO2 and I would add a little ethanol to my CO2, and that made things go faster, and did all my experiments and did everything. So I brought up that productivity, and then people were concerned, saying, no, I don't want to add ethanol and CO2 together. And then they would do 3-to-1 dilution of ethanol, and then they stick it in the freezer. I'm just like, oh, how does that work? Humans are involved, so you have to ask the questions all along the way. What are they doing when they get to the oil? Are they then using another type of ethanol and then sticking it in the freezer? And are they taking it out, and then how do they separate it from? Those are the questions, and some of the great, the processors out there have all those answers, but you have to make sure and ask it. The other one that I would say is that when you're working with a local lab, work with a local lab all the way from the beginning and make it a relationship with them. So that's the key that you really have to do. So what happens in this industry is that you can have all your product just fine, and then you add it into a gummy bears, and the specifications for sugar for a gummy bear, a regular gummy bear, is very, very different from the specifications of a hemp-based product. So you can have everything great and then suddenly you added pesticides over a level that they won't allow for cannabis and for hemp. And now you're just like, oh my gosh, how did I fail this? I put everything together. So, and then making sure that when vendors come in, they bring you a product. So if you are making something, you make sure that the vendors never change. You bring in the vendors with the local laboratory so that they know what you're using for other things, so you don't have something that comes out on this chromatogram that suddenly comes out at the same exact time, and this is giving you a false reading that is too high, or something that is coming in here and it's higher than what this is, and it says, oh, this is CBD, this is CBC, and you know that it's something underneath it. So you bring them in early throughout the entire process. That's the thing with the laboratories, making sure that they know and then testing everything. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll be on another panel at 12:30. I can hardly wait to hear what I'm going to say there. I'm always amused by myself.
I love listening to you talk.
You do well.
Good job.
Just, babblation.
I understand.
So you're making a lot of different products. Do you grow your own stuff too, or are you
No, I just,
So when you're seeing the growth in Delta 8, are you seeing a lot of Delta 8 that's out even locally here? I saw a lot of it in South Carolina. I saw a lot of it in...
I'd probably say the last 3-4 months. I'm new to the business. I started in December because I have to ride back in. And so I saw somebody have Delta 8 and tried it, and oh, that's awesome. Other people can benefit from this as well, so I started on the shop and sell her.
The Delta 8 helps with your used to be chronic pain? Is that what
Yeah.
It does help with you?
Yeah, I'm a paramedic, and so my back and knees are out from years of lifting 200-300 pound stuff. And so I had to stop because there's a Fly for Lifeline, which is a helicopter service, but I had to stop because my back was just too bad. And I started with Delta 8, and my back is...
Really? Awesome.
It doesn't, I can't like go and lift 1 million pounds or anything like that, it's aggravated, but as far as like pain in general, it's...
Inflammation.
Yes, the inflammation, thank you.
No, I just
Stops a lot.
a lot of service. You guys don't need one of these, right?
I'll chase you down.
All right.
What's your topic with your matter?
It's about at 12:30.
What am I talking about? Minors?
It's, yeah, we're talking about minors, separating minors.
Yeah. So it'd be very much like the man's question back there. Not that man, the other man. Not that now there's a woman there, so you can't really say it's a man, but you know what I mean?
Hey, you never know nowadays.
Yeah, Yes. So minors, and then tomorrow I forget what something else controversial.
Does the orange box test for mold?
No.
Is there anything out there that tests for mold?
Well, it's aflatoxin kits. So you have to get some aflatoxin kits from some of the vendors that they're already using in the corn industry, and the other ones you would use some of those to get a quick test. That's the one I would do. The two IR-based ones will give you water activity and give you moisture, because that's what those things do. All right. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.